morning, Scott. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about the differences between these different code books. I understand the city ordinances.
Correct.
And how the city council goes about passing the ordinances and making sure that we all have the laws that govern us and we agree to live by with living in the city limits, whether we agree with all of them or not. But there's more ordinances and regulations that the public has to follow, especially when it comes to building things, than just inside these books. Is that right?
Correct.
So what might that look like?
So I've got books here, stacks of books, and this is what we regulate buildings by.
So these books govern construction in the city how?
So what these do is these tell us how to build a building from the ground up. So they go everything from the footings, whether it needs a footing, whether it doesn't need a footing, and then tells us once the footing's in, how to build the subfloor, how to build the floor, how to build the walls, all the way up to the roof. And so they go into each detail for each building, each type of wood.
So these are written by the International Code Council. How is it that they come to govern
us?
Construction in the City of Enid?
That's a very good question. So the state of Oklahoma has adopted these codes. And then once they have adopted it, we, by effect, also adopt it. Because if we don't, the Oklahoma comes and says, nope, can't do it. We're going to step in. Now you have to follow them.
Okay, so the state of Oklahoma adopts like the International Building Code. I see 2018 there. And so the state makes it law.
Correct.
And then the state says cities or municipalities, if you govern any kind of building inside of your municipality, you have to follow these.
Correct.
And if you don't, we'll step in and do it for you.
That's exactly correct.
So by the city council passing these code family books, they're preventing the developers in the state of Oklahoma from having to deal with the state.
Yes. It
okay.
makes it more convenient for our inspectors to come out and look at it, and then instead of waiting 3 to 4 weeks for a state inspector to come out and look at it.
Okay. And so you mentioned having inspectors go out and look at it. How do those inspectors become qualified to enforce what looks like reams worth of regulations?
So usually each book has a test that goes with it. So the building code, we have a residential test that you take, and then we have a commercial. If you take both tests, you become an unlimited licensed inspector.
Okay.
So you have 4 different trades. You have a plumbing trade, a mechanical trade, which is your HVAC, and then you have your building trade and electrical. The only difference that is not written by the International Code Council is the NFPA 70, which is also called the National Electrical Code. It's the only one that's not written by International Code Council.
All right. And so there's a lot of codes out there about building and constructing. Is there anything that relates to property maintenance?
Yes, we have a book also. We follow the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code. That is also written by International Code Council. That gives us the definition of high grass and weeds, derelict vehicles, and everything. Unfortunately, if your tire's flat, it is considered a derelict vehicle because you cannot drive it. And that is in the code books.
Okay, so whenever our property inspectors are out there making their rounds, they have studied these international codes that the state enforces.
Correct.
And they're out there making that happen for the City of Enid.
We go to a 2-day class, packed full of knowledge. She goes over the state statutes, go over the International Code Council, and then we come back and then we confirm with our ordinances everything that we're taught.
Okay. So these books come out, the state adopts them, and then we in turn, through the city council and our code, we adopt them.
Correct.
Are there any changes that the city council can make to these books?
So once the books come out, the OUBCC suggests changes to the state. They have a full list of all the changes that are made. Once those are there, then it's brought to the city council of all those changes. The city can make more stringent regulations, more stringent rules.
Heighten the requirements?
Correct, but they can't lessen it. So we can't say, no, we don't want to follow any of this code.
Okay. Are there any of those changes that you can think of that the city council has pushed through?
So one of the ones that is in the ordinance, it requires the vehicles, the trucks that all our contractors use to be, their name has to be printed on the side, and it also has to be their license number on the side. The size of those are required in our books. There aren't anywhere in our code books. They are directly from our ordinances.
And our city council would care about that because that means that you as code enforcers can ensure that the public is protected from fly-by-night shady tradesmen.
So this way, if we drive by a house and we see what appears to be a construction vehicle and it doesn't have any license number, it gives us the ability to stop and talk with these people that are doing work. Find out if they're licensed, find out if they're permitted, get all the information and make sure that the homeowner or the commercial property owner are protected and making sure that they're getting the right deal.
And in addition to these books, there are some other things that the city's adopted as well. Two areas that I think you taught me about were fences and signs, right?
So the interesting thing is in our International Residential Code, it excludes fences under 7 feet. So because of that, we shouldn't have to inspect fences that are under 7 foot. But our ordinance says otherwise. So we have to permit those. Signs are another thing. We have an appendix in one of our books that talks about signs. We don't have to follow it because we didn't adopt the appendix, but we do have ordinances that are sign regulations that are closely worded to the sign ordinance.
So whenever someone walks into the code department and they're saying, I want to build something, there's a lot at play that you and your staff have to figure out between these books and those books to make sure that it's done legally, safely, complies with all regulations.
Somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to build a shed. My first question is how big? Are you building it or are you getting it from Lowe's to bring in a building? How is it going to be attached to the ground? Multitude of questions. Most people are like, I just want a shed. Well, unfortunately, my mind goes, well, all these other things, how are we going to make it safe? How do we make sure that a carport that you put in doesn't end up being your neighbor's carport because we have a gust of wind in Oklahoma picking up that open lifting it up over to our neighbors.
For sure. I
we have to attach it to the ground.
Yeah. I don't want my neighbor's carport in my living room either. No. Well, I appreciate your expertise and your staff's knowledge because the work that you do down here saves a lot of work in the city attorney's office, because if you weren't a great line of defense in helping the public know what to do and how to make sure they were compliant, our office would be flooded with people and us trying to learn these books that we did not go to school to figure out. So thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for the time you spent teaching me about these extra code books.
No problem. Thank you very much.